everyone. Thanks for joining the CaFÉ webinar today. My name is Justine Chappell, and I am the Communications and Marketing Manager for CaFÉ. In today's webinar, I'm going to talk about how to make your call stand out to artists. CaFÉ has seen an influx of calls in the past few months and years, I think kind of coming out of the pandemic. And so artists are facing more choice when they look to apply to different opportunities. Artists are also considering a lot of factors when applying to calls. So to help make your call more attractive to them, I'm going to be sharing some insights we've learned over the years and strategies for making your call stand out. And while there is a large variety of calls and some of these tips might not apply to everyone, I hope you find some things that you may want to incorporate yourself. The main key items that we'll cover include identifying and addressing artist preferences, crafting compelling call descriptions, and making your call more accessible and inclusive. We're first going to start today by talking about artists' needs and preferences within the changing landscape of the art world. Now, a lot of this information will be coming from our own experience working in CaFÉ with artists and art organizations on both sides of things. Again, I understand that everyone has their own experience and you're all the ones that are actually working on the ground, so to speak. So take this information as you see fit for your own situation. So this summer, actually, CaFÉ saw the highest number of open calls at one time since we started back in 2005. At one time, we saw over 300 calls open at the same time. That's a lot for artists to choose from when they head to CaFÉ and look to see what they can apply to. As the number of opportunities increase, you have to do what you can to stand out amongst the crowd and appeal to artists. This also means you have to understand what artists are looking for, what preferences they have for choosing one opportunity or another, and their needs. And as you know, artist preferences aren't static. They evolve over time. This can be influenced by societal changes, technological advancements, and shifts in artistic trends. So let's talk today about what factors we are seeing in today's climate that are affecting artists' decision. The first one probably will not come as a surprise to most, but we have entry fee cost. So one of the most popular and common things we hear from artists is that entry fee cost is a big factor in their decision. Artists are considering the financial responsibility and the investment that aligns with their artistic goals and how the entry fees play into that. Entry fees do add up if they apply to a lot of different calls. And while we do know entry fees are needed by the organization to cover certain costs, just know that artists think very carefully about what they spend their money on. So any way that you can address entry fees, and we'll talk a little bit later about some different strategies related to this, but just think about how entry fee costs are an influence to artists. Next, we have exhibition format. So think online versus physical exhibitions. Obviously, online exhibitions have become more popular since the pandemic, and online doesn't necessarily have to mean a lesser value. It's just different. And often those needs for online versus physical just need to be supplemented by other things. We have seen a good few organizations come through that put on online exhibitions. And I think just having a good online presence and creating ways for artists to have their work shared to networks, even online, really helps to add value to an online exhibition. Physical exhibitions as well as being considered by artists, the location of that exhibition, if they have to send their artwork or even travel to it, those are all things that are considered. So perceived value, that's another thing that artists look at, whether that be opportunities for exposure, award amounts, or the amount of the award that is being offered. Maybe if they have a chance to win a few $100s, that would be desirable or attractive to an artist. Also, chances for recognition. Maybe there is a reputable juror that's being used for the exhibition or the opportunity. Maybe it's a public art opportunity and the artist would have a good chance to be recognized by the community. So there you go. And then we also have timing. So looking at the application window of the event, the notification date, and then the overall timeline. So these are all things that an artist considers. Obviously, it's more of those logistical needs that an artist might have to consider how long they have to apply to the opportunity, when they expect to hear back. Maybe they do want to participate in, the opening ceremony or opening reception, or maybe they want to, maybe it's a public art project or something like that, where they have to spend a certain amount of time getting their sculpture, their project, their design, proposal, whatever it is, ready. So timing is really important for them to consider. Those are just some baseline factors for what we've seen artists looking at when considering the calls for entry they apply to. However, we can take this list further and identify even more deterrents for artists. These are things that likely come up as they start to apply to the call or look closely into the opportunity. So some common artist deterrents. Again, additional associated costs. So this is not just entry fees. These are anything like selection or participation fees, if that's required from the artist, if they're selected. Maybe travel or shipping costs for sending their artwork or traveling to the location for the project or the site. Extensive time commitments, again, very similar, but just, the time to complete the artwork before the deadline, maybe the time to travel to the exhibition, the time to put the proposal together, anything like that, just fill in the blank, artists are considering. And if there's an extensive time commitment or maybe a short window of time, artists might be deterred from applying. And that could be, applied to almost any different type of call. Complex application process. So this is something that we do see sometimes. Folks will create a call and artists apply to it, and we find through artists that are asking for our help to complete the application, that the application is too complex. It requires a lot from the artist. Maybe things are confusing. CaFÉ does try to make it, we make the actual technical process of applying pretty easy for artists, but it's up to you to build the application. And if your process becomes too complex, that might be a deterrent for artists. So think of certain things like, how many images are you requiring from artists? Are you also requiring an artist statement? That can be a pretty basic setup, but are you also requiring additional things? Do you have an extensive list of questions for artists that might take time and effort for them to complete in the application? Are you asking for references or letters of recommendation? Now, I'm not saying you can't do those things, but these are just additional things that artists look for to consider how much effort they have to put into applying. And again, all calls are different, so some of these things are needed, but you can consider what you actually need to receive from artists. So we'll talk a little bit about, how to build a kind of a nice and simple, easy to use application later on in the webinar. Another deterrent might be lack of an organization's reputation. We sometimes see this with new organizations, and while it is, something you have to think about as you're getting started, artists will research the organization and see if you seem like a trustworthy and worthwhile organization to have their work displayed by. So they're going to look for any red flags. They might look up your website, see what kind of presence you have, look up your social media, see if you are active on social media and if you engage with your audience. Lack of communication. So if an artist reaches out with any questions, if they don't get responses back, or if things just seem a little quiet from the organization, that's not going to look really good. Also, vague or confusing information about the exhibition or opportunity. When the artist looks at the prospectus and the event information, if things seem either too broad, too vague, maybe there's not anything specific to point to from previous exhibitions or previous projects, or an explanation about even if an organization is new, or if something becomes confusing, that's going to raise a flag to the artist and might be a deterrent for them not wanting to apply. They might also look at the theme or focus, see if anything seems misaligned. If that or the criteria of the call doesn't really resonate with the artist's style or body of work, they might be hesitant to apply. They might feel their submission might not be a good fit or not well received. Obviously, this is a very subjective thing, so it's not something you can necessarily control, but we'll talk about strategies related to theme or focus in the next section. And then finally, something like exclusivity clauses or licensing agreements might be a deterrent for artists. Some calls might include terms that require artists to grant certain rights to their work, or exclusivity clauses, which could limit the artist's ability to exhibit or sell their work elsewhere. So that can be a concern for artists. It might not be a deal breaker, but we'll talk about being clear about if any of these things apply to you. Again, you just don't want to be vague or confusing when it comes to artists, so that they would be, less likely to apply. So we'll talk about how to address that. Speaking of which, let's get to that next section, strategies to address these concerns. So, to create an overwhelming application process, you want to consider a lot of different things related to what I just talked about. And I'm going to kind of go into CaFÉ just briefly to show you various things that you might want to look at and just address in case you might think that some things might deter artists from applying. So, to address the concern of entry fees, what you might consider doing is offer reduced fees or fee waivers. Reduced fees is obviously something that is very specific to your organization, whether or not you can offer, but fee waivers might be a way that you can at least accommodate certain folks that might be low income or have trouble paying for the entry fee. Obviously, you want to attract good talent. And if someone is detracted from or deterred from applying because they can't pay the entry fee, offering a fee waiver could be a solution. So let's go into CaFÉ, and I'm just going to show you real quick how you would do that. So firstly, you would make sure that in your call editor, which is what I'm going to go to, in your somewhere in your call listing details, so that could be in your long description or eligibility or something like that, you can include that a fee waiver is available. I would recommend putting specific parameters of who is eligible for a fee waiver. And then once you do that, you'll want to create a coupon. So obviously you'll have your entry fee set up in the product editor. This is where we set that up. And then in the coupon section below, this is where it shows all the current coupons you have set up for your event. And you can click Create Coupon. You can also get to this page by going to Events here and clicking on Coupons. So the coupon manager is where you want to set up your fee waiver. So you'll take the empty line of this here, since we already have one created. You'll first give it a name, such as fee waiver. You're going to put the amount, whether that be in percentages or dollar amount. Maybe you're going to offer a 50% waiver for low-income folks, and you can set it up. And then maybe the code will just be specific to your organization is probably best, but something like if this was CaFÉ, I would put like CaFÉ waiver or something like that. You put the start and end dates. In this case, it's probably good to set it to the date that your application opens and then expires on the date it closes. That just makes sure that the coupon is valid. And then you would set it to enabled. And then you would discount whether or not you're discounting the entry fee, discounting the media fee, or anything else of the other products you've set up. Since this would just apply to the entry fee, I would apply it to the entry fee here and click Add. This will actually, if you ever see these invalid dates, that might mean that your access to CaFÉ, to the call in CaFÉ is expired. This is an old demo call earlier in the year, so it's currently outside of the applicable date, so I won't be able to add the coupon, but that's what that means. If you ever see that, then you'll just contact the CaFÉ team and they can fix it for you. Anyway, so that's how you can create a coupon to create a fee waiver. You would put that information. I wouldn't necessarily put the code itself into the call prospectus, but you can say that you have one available, contact, and you put your email to let us know if you are eligible for a waiver, and you would give them that code once you verify it. Might be a little bit of an extra step for you, but it's a really good idea to kind of help folks. And it kind of just shows, even if they don't need the waiver, it kind of is a good thing to add to your reputation that you're considering folks' need. All right, so then the next thing is to address some of these concerns is offer substantial submission windows. This just means giving artists enough time to apply. Obviously, it depends when an artist would see the opportunity if they have enough time to apply, but it also depends on how much of a window you have. I would say, and this is just kind of based on personal preference, but 30 days is really the minimum number of days that I would think, based on what we've seen, is an acceptable window for an application to be open. We understand some projects get put together pretty fast, so you might have a smaller window, but at least 30 days to give artists time, if they see the opportunity when it first gets posted, to give them time to apply. Maybe they have to make additional artwork. So that is just something to pay attention to. Obviously, I'll just go to the related part of CaFÉ to show you, but you'll want to look at your dates in the call editor. In the important date sections, so the window of time between accept applications and the application deadline, just give artists enough time to apply. The other thing I want to mention in this topic about kind of giving artists enough time, this also kind of includes being flexible with artists' circumstances. Maybe someone was a little bit late to apply, or they needed to make some changes. There's a couple different ways that you can do that. So if an artist comes to you and says that they've applied, but they need to make some changes, and the application deadline has not yet passed, what you need to do to allow an artist to modify their application is change their status to incomplete. So incomplete is the status that you'll use to put artists in who need to make changes before the deadline. Now, if an artist comes to you and needs to make a change to their application after the deadline is passed, instead of incomplete, you would put them in exception. It's the same process for you, just changing them to a different status is the only difference, and an artist would go in and be able to modify their application. So those are ways that you can kind of be flexible about, allowing an artist to edit their submission. If an artist did not apply, but the deadline is passed, there's a couple different ways that the CaFÉ team can help you reopen your call, whether that be reopening it privately just for the artist, or there's actually kind of a back end workflow we can allow artists to submit after the deadline if they've already started an application. That's information we can see on our end, and we can help the artists complete the application after the deadline is passed. So there are some options available if an artist comes to you with an extenuating circumstance and you want to be able to allow them to apply. So doing things like that too can really just help artists understand that you're there to help them and you want their talented work. So being flexible is always a good idea. The next thing that you can do is to streamline your application requirements. So this means, having straightforward image requirements and other things that you're going to collect from artists, making sure those are straightforward, and then also building the application form so that it's easy to fill out. Again, back in the call, we'll go to the call editor. The first thing you want to do is that your requirements are clearly stated in the event information. We have the application required section that is, that you must fill out, but make sure you're very clear about what images or other files are required from artists, which ones are optional, and giving that information there. Our requirements are listed in the separate section of the call based on the requirements that we set up for you when you first added the call. But it's good to have it in your call details, that what kind of images you're looking for. This could also mean not only saying how many images, but what kinds of images are you looking for. If it's, for example, a sculpture opportunity, if you want one image of the full view, 2 additional images of detail work, you'll want to describe that in the prospectus. And then make sure you're listing additional application requirements, such as if you're requiring an artist statement, if you need their resume, references, all those kinds of things should be listed out clearly so an artist knows before they start applying what they need to prepare. Once you've done that, you'll want to build out an application form that is easy to use and that makes sense. The application editor, obviously, is where you are creating all of these things, down to the application question section. The artist statement options is just an easy way to collect artist statements by turning that on. Once you turn it on, you can give additional instructions, but you don't need to. So that's a pretty easy way to just collect artist statements. And then the only thing that I really want to touch on in the custom form question section, without going into the process too much, is just making sure that you are setting the correct question type to the type of question you're asking. So if your question is a yes or no question, use the radio button style so that they can only select one answer type. If you need them to actually type something out, then you can use the text box. Rather, if you were to have a yes or no question and then have a text box, it's kind of counterintuitive to have them type in yes or no. We also have some additional question types like a drop-down list or a checkbox for folks to be able to, a checkbox, they can select as many that apply to them, but make sure you're just using the correct question type. And if I were to go to preview call, you can preview just to make sure that, the application form looks good, that it looks like it's easy to fill out and nothing's going to be confusing to an artist, whether or not nothing's going to be confusing for the artist to know how to fill out the form. And you can also do things like conditional logic if you didn't know that. So for example, if I were to click yes, I'm a member, you can see that this additional question pops up and I can do those additional things. That just kind of makes a nice user workflow or user interface so that the person filling out the form can easily follow along. So for example, if I had all of these questions created, whereas only, these 2 questions would apply to a member, I wouldn't want to include those if they're not a member, because then the non-member would be confused about whether or not they need to fill out these questions. So use conditional logic. We have some help materials in our help center about how to create conditional logic questions, but simply, going in here and enabling this conditional logic tool to be able to make the question appear based on a previous answer. So that's just a little bit about creating, a straightforward application and making sure you do preview and kind of test out your own application to make sure that it makes sense when an artist fills it out. Okay. Next up, we have, building your reputation and presence. This isn't something so much that you really do in CaFÉ, but it could be something that can help you attract artists. These are things just like making sure you have a website, but not only that, making sure your website's filled with information about you and the opportunities that you provide, making sure you're, on social media, if that's something you want to do, just to kind of show that you're active and you're responsive. I think a lot of those red flags come up when there's really only a few things that for the artist to look at, and they are trying to avoid, illegitimate calls or calls that aren't going to be valuable to them. So making sure you kind of build your reputation online is going to be a good thing. All right. And then next we have communicate timely and effectively. So this obviously just kind of goes into building your reputation over time, knowing that artists know that you do communicate timely with them. So this includes notifying artists of the jury results or providing updates in the event of delays or changes. So again, in CaFÉ, you'll want to utilize the events communication tool. This is where you will draft and send your notifications to artists when they are invited or not invited. And doing this in a timely manner after your jury is complete will be beneficial and make artists happy. So just use this tool. You can also use this tool to notify artists before the jury begins if they're all in the received status, which is where they go once they submit. Notify the received status if you have any delays to the start of your jury or anything like that, so that artists are aware of any changes or updates to your event or your, jury process. That just is kind of a great way to let artists know that you are thinking about them and that you appreciate their time. And then next we have be upfront about licensing agreements. Again, this is all stuff that is just best practices for communicating what your exhibition is about or your project. So in the call editor, you'll want to include in your rules and terms to apply. This is what used to be called the legal agreement, but It should have information about not only to applying, but anything that an artist must agree to in order to apply. And this could include or be expanded to anything that the artist will have to agree to once they've been invited. Artists must agree to these terms in order to access the application. So it's good to include all that information there so that they can see it up front. So if you do have any exclusivity clauses or licensing agreements, be sure to put that in there. And then the last thing is, something that you can do if you are able, and that's providing feedback to applicants. This is something that is just kind of nice for artists to know. You can do this in a couple different ways. You can do it on I think the best way to do it would be a case-by-case basis. If an applicant reaches out to you, maybe they weren't invited and they want to know any comments the juror left for them, you can actually pull that information and provide it to them if you want. So you can go to the jury section, jury administration. And in the finalized section of the jury page, you can download the jurors' scores. And so you would click download. I'm actually going to click view scoring history so that it doesn't download the report, but you would maybe click download scores. And I would, again, select the round. And not only will this give me the score, but I don't know if I have any examples here, but next to where it says, let's say juror no, if the juror left any comments, it would be provided in this section. So you can locate the application in this list here or on that downloadable report and pull the comment if a juror left it. If they didn't leave any comments, you could maybe just share the score with them. Obviously, if it's a yes or a no, that's pretty straightforward in itself. But, just at least offering to go check to see if the juror had any feedback for the artist is nice to offer. So you can even go so far as to include in your jury notification that you're willing to offer feedback for artists who are interested and to have them contact you. I think that just kind of creates, a welcoming environment and then would attract the artist to come back and apply again next year, because that's something that you'd want to do as well, is make sure that even if artists aren't invited a particular year, that they come and check for you next year or for your next opportunity, not necessarily next year. So that's a little bit about strategies to address these concerns that we talked about. The next thing I'm going to go over is how to craft compelling call opportunities. So creating an attractive call for entry is crucial to engage artists. So we'll talk about how to kind of craft your call from the beginning to stand out to artists. The first is to clearly and explicitly highlight the benefits of why an artist should apply to your call. Again, there's a lot of different calls out there. A lot of them look similar. So being very specific about what an artist would get out of your opportunity is one of the best things you can do. So you can outline what artists will gain, such as exposure to a wider audience, opportunities for networking, monetary awards and prizes. All those things should be really clearly defined in your event information. Again, let's go back to your call editor here. So in the call listing details again, you'll want to do this in both the short description and the long description. For those of you who don't know, the short description will appear on the list of calls on the CaFÉ page, and it's a short, brief summary of your call that will attract artists to click more info or click apply to be able to open up your call and see the long description. So the short description is only seen on that list of calls. So we recommend copying basically your short description into the beginning of your long description to introduce the opportunity to artists. So in this long description, that's where you want to be specific because it's at the top of the call details page. I'll actually go click on preview call to show you what that page looks like. This is what all the information in the call editor will come to. So, in here is where you're going to want to be at the top to attract artists, very clear about what artists will gain from your opportunity. And that's something that you think is obvious, but when you come across calls that are just too vague or just kind of meh in the description and doesn't really showcase what an artist would get out of it. So make sure you're doing that. Oh, and these are all things I mentioned. Engagement or education opportunities as well is a good thing to note. The next thing to create a compelling call would be to provide transparent guidelines and selection criteria. I already went over this, but again, it's just making sure that your application requirements are complete and transparent and includes everything the artist needs to prepare ahead of time. Artists need to know if they're eligible as well, so making sure your eligibility criteria is clear. Making sure that they know what you're looking for. If you have a theme, you want to make sure you're expressing exactly what that theme means and what artwork is considered as part of that theme, what mediums, artwork mediums are accepted. You want to also, kind of do things to build an artist's confidence in their ability to apply, whether that be encouraging emerging artists or amateur artists to apply, whether that be kind of mentioning that the theme can be loosely interpreted, or kind of describing the juror and what the juror has typically gone for. Well, maybe you don't want to get that specific, but at least kind of showing the juror's reputation or information if you have about the jurors that the artist can research. So yeah, the more vague you are about all these things, the more you set yourself up for artists thinking that they might not be eligible or worthy, or maybe their work doesn't apply. So being clear in all those things will really help encourage artists to want to enter their work. The other thing you can do is show examples of previous exhibitions or projects. That will give an artist a good idea of what they're going to get out of it. Maybe there is an online exhibition component that they can go and browse from the previous one and kind of just see what their artwork would look like, giving them ways to envision themselves having their artwork displayed by you. So you can direct artists straight to your website to learn more about those kinds of things, or just kind of also helps build that reputation to show what you've done in the past. This next one's very specific, but it's something that we come across a lot. Make sure you avoid using generic names and or acronyms. And this means your call name. So in the call editor, call listing details, your call name here. Obviously, this one's not a bad example because it's a demo call, but I would avoid terms that are just specific like this, where I guess the organization name is good to have, but some people really do call their call juried exhibition. There are hundreds of juried exhibitions on CaFÉ, so make sure your call name is specific. This will help not only attract artists, but it will help artists be able to find you if they're searching for your call on the CaFÉ site and are searching in our list. You want to be specific about, at least put in your organization name if it is a juried exhibition, but maybe it's your 17th annual exhibition, maybe it's your open theme exhibition. Just put anything in there that will make it not only specific, but enticing to artists. So you could also, include the theme or the name of the theme in your title. We do see that a lot. So just make sure you're giving something to pique the interest of the artists. Also the thing about acronyms can be, it depends. They're a good tool, but at least somewhere you'll want to define what the acronym means so that an artist actually knows. There are a lot of acronyms in the world, and it's easy to kind of just brush them aside. So being specific about what that is a good idea. And then the other thing we have is considering enticing themes. So again, just kind of create themes if you're able. This is more exhibition-based, but it could be for any of those projects or public art things to just kind of attract artists to specific themes that their work should apply to, or maybe kind of inspiring them to create new work to apply with. So it's good to have broad themes are nice for variety. So that's good to kind of keep a theme, but have it kind of broad so that a lot of different artists could apply. But also giving them something specific to kind of pique their interest is one of the ways that you can kind of attract artists. Try not to be too specific, or then you'll limit the artists who have work that will apply to the theme. But you can hit a nice balance, and that will attract some good talent. The other thing I'll mention here is that you can upload a logo to your call details by going to the call editor here and in this logo section. The logo can be just for your organization, but Maybe you create a custom logo or image for the call that addresses the theme, or maybe has a graphic that entices the artist to apply as well, because they can kind of see the visual vibe, so to speak, of the call, and can include that and just kind of use the logo to your advantage there. And then lastly, we have integrate your call details throughout the application. This is something that is a good idea to look into and just consider. Make sure that the important information is easily accessible within your application form, including the call details page, but also the application itself, reducing the need to kind of switch back between documents. And again, just make sure that your application is user-friendly and easy. So again, let's go to, this is our application. So let's say here this is our call details. We have the application requirements, and maybe somewhere in the requirements there's something specific about the artwork that needs to be uploaded, or something specific about the resume or the artist statement that they'll need to prepare. So having this information is great here. Obviously, it's kind of a required thing, making sure artists see this before they apply. But even kind of copying over some of the information into the application itself will make it so that the artists don't have to keep flipping back between this page and this page, and they can kind of see what you're looking for before they answer that particular question or fulfill that certain requirement. A good example of this is using informational only question types. So again, in the application editor, you can build an info only question under the type informational only. And for example, maybe you put something here that kind of says, for your references, let's say I built a references question, I would say on the application itself, by using this type of question, I'm not going to write it out now, but I would say something like, make sure your references are from someone you've known in the last 5 years, or something like that. This is information you would provide in your prospectus, but also putting it on the application would make it so that artists don't have to refer to that or maybe miss it on the prospectus. They see it right there on the application. And again, information only is the question type used to just put information on the application page that doesn't require an answer from the artist. So again, just making sure that your call details are available to artists in whichever way that they might need it, so that they're, not only fulfilling your requirements, but that they have a nice process and an enjoyable time applying to your call. Ensuring accessibility and inclusion in calls is very important. Promoting accessibility and inclusion and fosters a diverse pool of applicants and promotes equitable opportunities. So let's talk about some ways that you can achieve this. First, addressing accessibility needs. There are a few things that we have here. Offering alternative formats for application materials. So obviously, this is CaFÉ, and CaFÉ, we do prefer that you use CaFÉ for your applications because it's more streamlined and easy to use for both organizations and artists. But we understand that sometimes you need to take things either back to paper or offer an additional solution for folks who may need accommodations. We've seen calls that use CaFÉ as their primary method, but they also go into their community with paper applications and paper prospectuses and details that offers artists who might not be online the chance to apply to their call because it's in their community. So definitely think about ways that you can expand your reach and offer additional methods if that's something that is important to you. Providing language options. So CaFÉ is working on translation tools. This is something that in order to make our site more accessible, we are hoping to provide. So meaning translation tools that could translate your call into a different language. For now, though, it's a good idea to think about ways that you can offer different languages for your call details in your application. We've seen calls that provide their prospectus once in English and then just again copied in Spanish. So that's a great way to start. Chrome and some other browsers do have translation tools. So maybe calling that out in the application, saying, if you need this information in a different language, do XYZ to translate the page or reach out to us if you need additional language options. So just being considerate for folks that might need the information in a different language. And then offering accommodations for artists with disabilities, both during the application process and the exhibition and project process. So both on and off CaFÉ, including information in your prospectus that accommodations are available. That's a great start. And then you can address those needs as they come up. So just in general, it's about being receptive and communicative about an artist's needs. And if a disabled artist wants to apply and they come to you with concerns, just being open to talk with them about it. And then additional inclusion practices include featuring artists from underrepresented communities. This could be as simple as just kind of encouraging artists of certain communities to apply. It could mean having that past work of artists from a variety of backgrounds represented and being attuned to that. Also consider the representation of your jury. Again, this is just things for you to consider. We're not telling you that you have to do one thing or another, but consider the demographic makeup of your jury and see if it represents the community you're serving or the community that your exhibition or project will take place, or if there's more opportunities to make your jury panel more diverse. Just consider those kinds of things, and that might attract artists of more backgrounds to want to apply. Also, embrace inclusive themes. Look into themes that resonate with a diverse range of experiences and cultures. Themes that are often open-ended can be interpreted from various perspectives and allow artists from different backgrounds to connect with the call and feel that their contributions are valued. Include virtual options or hybrid options. So some people might not be able to travel or see things in person. So even if you have a physical exhibition, consider a virtual component. That's a great way to share the outcomes with a wider audience and attract a broader, more diverse reach of artists the next time. And then finally, offer mentorship or specifically feedback. In this case, I would say offer opportunities for emerging artists to receive feedback on their submissions. This can help artists improve their work, gain valuable insights, and enhance their confidence, especially if they're new to submitting to open calls. So those are just some things that you can do to ensure accessibility and inclusion, and consider some of the things that you might want to incorporate into any of your future opportunities. This concludes our webinar for what you can do to help your call stand out to artists. By understanding artists' needs, addressing concerns, and crafting compelling calls, we can contribute to a more vibrant and inclusive art community. If you have any more in-depth questions or questions specific to your call, you can contact us here at cafehelp@westaff.org. Thanks again for joining our webinar. Be sure to join us next month.